You're like the Dos Equis guy. I feel like you are the most interesting man in the world.
If you're a wrestling fan, I got some interesting shit.
But
Some MMA stuff, I got some interesting stuff. Outside of that, it's really not a lot I like.
I don't know. You've got to like the people that you've just been hanging out with through all of this is pretty amazing. Not just wrestling, not just MMA people, because UFC brings in a lot of stars. You've
Man,
rubbed elbows with a
it's
lot of them.
just crazy how popular and mainstream the UFC has become. I mean, you go back, I mean, in 2000, I had a contract to buy 51% of that company for 500 grand.
Stuff.
I mean,
No.
and I was probably overpaying
What was it going to be?
at the time. It was the original group that owned it. They had lost their pay-per-view. You know, it was when John McCain got up on his soapbox and said this is human cockfighting, even though he's the biggest boxing fan in the world. And that's okay. You know, it's okay to get punched in the face, you know, this many times, but you know, not get thrown in a submission hold. He'd never even been to a show. So, you know, he got his buddy at Time Warner to take it off paper. You could buy porn. You know, you can order pornography on pay-per-view at the time, but you can't order a UFC fight.
That's literal cockfighting.
Yeah, right. So they were struggling. They were almost out of business. They knew they had to get regulated to stay in business so they get back on pay-per-view. So they knew they needed to get the commissions to sign off on them. Nevada obviously is, you know, the premier athletic commission in the country. And they figured if they could get the athletic commission in Nevada to approve them and sanction them, they could get the others to follow suit, get back on pay-per-view. But they couldn't get them to get to a show to try to push the process along. They finally got Larry Hazard in New Jersey to agree to sanction a show on a one-off. And he got the couple guys from Nevada Commission to come watch the show. And if the show was going to work and go off without a hitch, they thought they had a chance of getting approved in Nevada, which is eventually what happened. But they ran out of money and they couldn't do the show. So I got introduced to Bob Meyerowitz and we struck a deal where I was going to buy 51% of the company from him for 500 grand. Had to put 200 up immediately as a down payment so they could fund that show. We were going to close and I was going to put $1 million in escrow to carry the company for a year or a year and a half, pending getting sanctioned and hopefully getting back on pay-per-view. Signed the contract, got about a week into it, was getting some information from them, the due diligence I needed to get, put up the 200 grand. It was, you know, guaranteed by ticket sales and they had money coming from a UFC Japan show they had done that was, you know, also assigned over to me in case the deal didn't go through. And after a week, he just went silent and stopped sending me my stuff, stopped communicating, disappeared.
He ghosted you.
Ghosted me. And it turns out because he got a better offer from the Zuffa guys.
Wow.
So when I heard about what happened through some back channels, I called him up. I was like, hey, dude, I left him a message. I don't care if you sell to these guys. These guys got deeper pockets than I do. They've got way better connections in Nevada than I do. These guys will do 1,000 times better job of running this company than I will. I don't even really care to own it. I didn't want the company to go out of business. I wanted a place for my guys to fight. Give me my 200 grand back. Ghosted me. Had to sue him. Went on for years.
Is this a regret? Like, do you wish that you had owned UFC?
These guys, who knows what I would have probably kept it on the same type of schedule, a few shows a year, just try to get a television break. There's no way I would have done a job like these guys did.
Yeah.
They went so far into the red running that company. They were bleeding money right and left, and they just kept fighting. And they did. I mean, nobody's going to do the job that Dana did and what they did. So, not a regret at all in that regard, you know. And if you ask me right now, would I rather have owned the UFC, assuming by miracle I did a great job of it and it became a multi-billion-dollar company? Would I rather own the UFC or would I rather own American Top Team? I'd rather own my team. I mean, we got 100 fighters on it. Every weekend I've got a home game or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. And, you know, I'm watching these fights with a huge vested interest. These are my guys and we're with them every day. And I feel like I'm part of, you know, all these fights. Whereas, you know, the UFC, they all love the business and they love the fights, but they're just hoping for good fights. And they're hoping that the right guy wins that they can promote. And they're dealing with all that bullshit. I'd rather be part of a team than part of a big company like that. So no, zero regrets.
I think that story solidifies that you are, in fact, the most interesting man in the world. Come on.